It is 6:30. Members of council are assembled when you're ready to begin.
Okay, thank you, Don. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order this council planning meeting for February the 18th, 2025, and say hello to all of my colleagues virtually and everybody who's watching us via the live stream. Glad everybody's with us. Second item on the agenda is the land acknowledgement, and Councillor Halpin has that this evening.
Oops. We acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional lands and treaty territory of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, which consists of the Chippewas of Saugeen and the Chippewas of Nawash Unceded First Nation. We understand this land holds immense significance to the people of Saugeen Ojibwe Nation. We appreciate those who live and work alongside us today and who continue the traditions of their ancestors as stewards of the land we are privileged to inhabit. We thank them for their contributions. We thank them for the contributions they have made in both caring for the land and shaping this community. We commit to truth and reconciliation, to acknowledging the truth about what happened to Indigenous peoples because of colonization, and to reconciliation, which begins with each and every one of us. Just at this moment, I'd like to share that in my involvement in working with Spark Training Center, which deals with providing education to adults, that we've had a very great uptake and success rate with our students from Saugeen First Nation, and continuing the tradition that I noticed as a teacher at Saugeen District Secondary School of what great tradesmen come from Saugeen First Nation. As a local government and public organization, we are dedicated to learning about Indigenous culture, to fostering a better relationship with First Nations and their people, and we commit ourselves to actions that move us forward on the path to healing, along with the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation.
Okay, thank you. Third item on the agenda is disclosures of pecuniary interest. Anyone have one of those I'd like to declare at this time? Seeing none, of course, you can do that anytime if you need to. So we're all the way down to public meetings, and we have two public meetings this evening. Let me just get to my right screen here. So next on the agenda is a public meeting for zoning bylaw amendment Z 2024-074 for sure. This is a public meeting under the Planning Act. If anyone from the public is interested in this application or wishes to receive a notice of the decision, please send an email to bcplpe@brucecounty.on.ca. First, we will receive a report from the planning staff. Then council members will have an opportunity to ask questions, and I will ask them to reserve their comments on the application until after we've heard from the public. Then we will hear from the public who are here in person, virtually, or who have submitted correspondence to the email address that I mentioned earlier. Members of the public are advised that the right to appeal the decision on this application is limited to specified persons and public bodies as defined in the Planning Act, or the owner or applicant of the land subject to the amendment who have provided oral or written comments to council on the application before the decision is made. After we've heard from the public, council will discuss and consider a recommendation on this application. So I'll now declare the public meeting open, and I'll ask the planner on the file to present the application, and the planner on this file is Karina Smith. So take it away, Karina.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, you're just fine.
Thank you. So I am presenting this evening on the zoning application at 1906 Bruce Road 40. So the applicants initially applied to the county for a severance application. So through the consent process, they were looking to divide their existing farm holding into two parcels, one being 41 hectares and the other being 39 hectares. And that would be recreating the original crown lots on these lands. The applicant submitted a zoning bylaw amendment in response to comments that we had received on the consent application from the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation. They had identified a high archaeological potential given the property's proximity to the Saugeen River and the Saugeen Valley corridor, which is a historic Indigenous area of high potential for archaeological purposes. So the purpose of the zoning bylaw amendment is to apply that holding provision to lands with high archaeological potential. So should development proceed on either of these parcels in the future, there would be the requirement for an archaeological assessment in accordance with the provisions in the zoning bylaw, specifically the H1 zoning provisions, which would require completion of the assessment, implementing any recommendations from that assessment, and submitting that in consultation with the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, and then ultimately submitting the report to the ministry to be entered into the registrar. I'm happy to take any questions at this point in time. I don't believe the owners will be online this evening, but I'm available to take back anything that council needs.
Yeah, so thank you. So we'll do this in a different order than what I read out there. This version of the script is reversed from the way that we normally do this. So we're actually going to begin with comments from members of the public, and the planners just said that the applicant or their agent is not present. Understanding that, then we'll ask if there anyone else from the public here to speak either in support of the application or with questions, concerns, or objections to the application.
Mayor Charbonneau, there are no other members of the public who are here specifically for that public meeting. There are members for the next one, though.
Okay, thank you. And are there any written submissions that were not already discussed in the planning report, presentation, or oral submissions?
No, nothing additional has been received.
Thank you very much. So then we will ask if council members have any questions before we close the public meeting and discuss the application. Councillor Halpin.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. So this question is for the planner, Karina Smith. So with this application, they are simply splitting apart what was once separate lots that became joined. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And at this point, there is no plan for any development on that. This is just simply to separate the two lots into two parcels as they originally were.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Right. Yeah, Councillor Davinsky.
Sorry. Also, there are the one picture I saw, the hand-drawn picture. There's a 39-acre parcel of land, and this is to Karina, through you, Mr. Mayor. And there is the 40 acre or 40 hectare parcel of land. And we want to hold off, or we want to put a holding provision on it because of the high possibility or potential of archaeological finds on that property. And when we say that property, what are we talking about? The 39 or the 40 or both?
Planner.
Yes, thank you for the question through you, Mayor. So it applied to both the 39 and the 41.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Are there further questions? I might just follow up on Councillor Davinsky's question. I'm confused as to why we would need to put a holding on the retained parcel, since, as far as I know, there's no potential to develop anything there. I mean, there's a house already there. They can't build another one.
Yes, thank
Yeah.
you, Mayor, through you. So on the retained lands, there would be an opportunity to potentially build farm buildings or accessory structures, and so that would apply to those as well. But normal farm practicing, plowing, tilling would not be required and would not trigger the need for the assessment.
I see. Would we normally require the placement of a holding provision to facilitate a severance to recreate an original township law?
Yes, sorry, through you, Mayor. So, through county policy, we do have policies as they relate to recreation of merged lots. And so typically we wouldn't apply conditions uh, to those. We would process the consent application and circulate to agencies. Through this application, when we did circulate the consent application, we did receive the feedback from SON as it relates to the potential on this particular site. So both the parcel to be retained and the parcel to be severed. And they did indicate that this, while it's mapped as potential, it is a high potential, and they had some interest ensuring that the holding provision would be applied to both of those parcels should development proceed in the future. And so this is a unique circumstance, I would say, in most situations where we are looking to just recreate original town lots. We would not be applying the holding provision. And through the housekeeping amendments, there is actually specific language in there as it relates to the application of holding provisions for archaeological purposes. In this instance, because SON had expressed a particular unique interest on this file as the application was moving through the process, the applicant opted to continue the process forward, and in order to move that forward, did agree to submit the application and have that holding applied to the lands.
So is it the policy then of Bruce County Planning now that if SON asks for a holding, that we'll apply one?
We did evaluate that with the applicant, and we did have conversations with SON. And again, I would reiterate that this is a unique file. It's not our intent that we would be treating any application differently, but there is always a chance through the circulation of an application that we may receive comments back, whether they're from SON, Environment Office, or other agencies where we might need to look at the specifics of a policy and how it's applied. I think in this case, the county policy doesn't provide a specific remedy for situations where SON has indicated an interest or any First Nations group has indicated an interest above and beyond what's already been captured in some of our mapping and policy. So we're certainly going to take this example back and see if there's a way to facilitate a movement of these applications or similar situations moving forward.
And I'll just finish my comment before I move on. I see the Vice Deputy Mayor there, but I just I think out of fairness, like we obviously it's the town of Saugeen Shores is a friend of the Saugeen First Nation and the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, and we consider it a priority to protect the archaeological assets of the First Nation. But I think also we owe a measure of fairness to the property owners of the town of Saugeen Shores. And one thing to me that's sort of a first principle of the official plan and zoning bylaw is we write down what the law is so that anybody can read it and understand it and know how it applies to them. And this seems like an unwritten law. This seems like something that's come up because it's fairly explicit, frankly, that in the zoning bylaw that when you're recreating original township lots, that a holding provision will not be applied. And in this case, it is being applied. And the applicant has voluntarily complied, but probably the applicant didn't feel like they had a lot of choice. So I think we need to look at the plan here and decide if it's going to be the case that if the SON wants to see holding provisions to protect archaeological resources that they've identified or that we've identified, that in that case, it's very likely that we're going to ask or apply a holding provision to those properties. I think we just need to be upfront about that. If that's the way it is, then that's what we need to say. So, I mean, I don't have any difficulty. The applicant is obviously supportive of this, and we do want to protect those archaeological resources. But I think going forward, we're going to need to clarify this in the plan and get it down on paper in some way so that everybody, all property owners in the town of Saugeen Shores can understand what could happen as this process plays itself out. So just my thoughts. The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question about parkland dedication. I see in the report to you, to Karina, that we're not going to take parkland, obviously, in that area. There's no reason to have a park out in the country, obviously. But will we be is this application eligible for parkland dedication fees or not?
Thank you for the question. If I may, I might defer to my colleagues at the town to answer that question.
See Candace Ham there.
Yes, through you, Mayor Charbonneau. The town provided comments back to the county to indicate that parkland dedication would not be required to reestablish these two existing crown lots. So we're not seeking parkland dedication for this severance.
Including no dollars.
No, we're not seeking land or cash in lieu of parkland for this application. That's correct.
Just explain why, Candace, again, for this application.
So typically the town is seeking parkland dedication either in land or in dollars when there's going to be a new residential parcel created. In this instance, they're recreating two existing crown lots. And so it hasn't been the practice of the town to collect parkland in that scenario.
Understood. Thank you.
The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, and through you. Karina mentioned that there's enhanced mapping or upgraded mapping with the county, and the river has been mentioned in proximity to the river. Is this mapping of resources and these indications of proximities to this or that would potentially be of interest to a property owner? Is there some place where all of that is evident on a website or evident in some way that a property owner could do a little research on their own to have an awareness of, if your property is here, you might need to consider this factor, this factor, this factor. You mentioned mapping. Is that mapping available to the public?
At this time, the mapping, sorry, through you, Mayor. At this time, the mapping is not available to the public, but what we do share with proponents who submit inquiries to us or who go through a pre-consultation process with county staff, we do advise them if they do fall within an area of high archaeological potential. So generally that may be within 300 meters of a water body. It may be within 300 meters of a known archaeological site. And so we would refer applicants to the ministry's checklist, and that is where it lays out those certain requirements. So if you fall for example, within 300 meters of an archaeological site, then there would be a potential trigger for further assessment on a separate property. In those cases, we would refer the applicant over to the ministry's checklist, which lays out those criteria. We've taken those criteria as just a screening tool to assist county planning staff with assessing where there may be high potential. We have been working with our Indigenous groups, including the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, to refine that mapping and building the what we call the integrity layer of that mapping, removing lands that may have been subject to past assessments. But then we also, through the inquiry and pre-consultation process, also refer applicants to Saugeen Ojibwe Nation and the historic Saugeen Métis for consultation if we feel that they fall in an area that would have that high potential, and particularly where our Indigenous groups have a high interest or have indicated a high interest or an interest in seeing applications in those particular areas.
Mr. Mayor? Thank you, Karina, for that very thorough response. So at some point, this mapping of sites may in fact be available to the public. I heard you say 300 meters. I seem to recall years ago it wasn't 300 meters, but at some point there will be the possibility of people knowing where these locations are in our community. Is that something that we should expect in the next year, or is it still much further out than that?
Yes, thank you for the question. I don't have an exact timeline on that. So the archaeological management plan is the guiding document that county staff do work from. And currently we're looking at and working on the implementation of the archaeological management plan, which is building that mapping tool. And hopefully at some point we will be able to share it. I'm not sure if the intent is to share that out broadly with the public. There are some features on that mapping that we wouldn't want to share out broadly to the public, such, for example, archaeological sites. We don't necessarily want to point those out to everyone, but certainly sharing it with the building officials at our local municipalities, and ensuring that applicants are fully aware through the pre-consultation process that there may be potential, and they may be required either to submit an assessment as part of a complete application, or that there is a potential that through the circulation process, we may receive comments back, as we did on this example, from Indigenous groups indicating a potential interest in an area.
Thank you.
Further questions before I close the public meeting? Seeing none, then I will now declare the public meeting to be closed. Are there any further, before I ask for further comments, I'm just going to read the resolution. Give me a second here. The resolution is that, subject to a review of submissions arising from the public meeting, the council approves zoning bylaw amendment Z 2024-074 for sure, and bylaw 16-2025. So are there any comments from members at this time? Councillor Halpin.
I'm sorry, Mayor, I was just going to move that.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's a good idea. Moved by Councillor Halpin, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. All right, so now we'll move on to our second planning meeting. Give me just a second to get back here. So, sorry. All right. So next on the agenda is a public meeting for major revision to draft plan of subdivision 41T-2011-1.44 and zoning bylaw amendment Z-2022-141 Summerside. This is a public meeting under the Planning Act. If anyone from the public is interested in this application or wishes to receive a notice of the decision, please send an email to bcplpe@brucecounty.on.ca. First, we will receive a report from the planning staff. Then we will hear from the public who are either, well, who will be here virtually or who have submitted correspondence to the email address that I just read. Then council committee members will have an opportunity to ask questions, and I will ask them to reserve their comments on the application until we've heard from the public. Members of the public are advised that the right to appeal the decision on this application is limited to specified persons and public bodies as defined in the Planning Act, or the owner or applicant of the land subject to the amendment, who have provided oral or written comments to council on the application before the decision is made. After we have heard from the public, council will discuss and consider a recommendation on this application. So I will now declare the public meeting open, and I'll ask the planner on the file to present the application, and we have Karina Smith back for this one. Karina.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. So I am bringing back a report today to council on a major revision to the Summerside subdivision in Port Elgin. Associated with that is a zoning bylaw amendment, which would facilitate that change. So the purpose of the amendments to the draft plan and to the zoning bylaw is to allow for a modified subdivision design. So the Summerside subdivision was approved in 2011, and various phases of that development have received final approval, which means they have addressed the conditions, and those earlier phases have been built out or in the process of being built out. The last two phases in the development, phases 11 and 12, which are at the very north end of the Summerside site, which is just south of Concession 10 and west of Highway 21. The applicant was looking to amend the stormwater management facility design, which was originally a linear facility along Concession 10. They are now proposing a more standard stormwater management facility pond design. And so that did shift some of the development layout on the site. They've straightened out and realigned some of the road network to be more linear and in line with the earlier phases of the development. And they have also changed some of the density and the layout of the proposed units in the proposal. So they are proposing a mix of dwelling types across this development site. So the application did have a public meeting in August of 2023. At that time, it was noted that we had received comments from the Blue Water District School Board requesting an opportunity to work with the Summerside landowner to facilitate a potential school site in this location. And so since that time, the applicant has been working with the school board to find an appropriate site within the development plan. And so that is now in the proposed phase 11, which is in the northeast corner of the site. And so that block has been identified as either a potential school site for an elementary school, or it could alternatively be for high density residential development. And that is subject to finalization of the purchase and sale agreement with the landowner. And I'm sure Mr. Aston and Mr. Pride can speak to that in more detail. And so the most recent changes to the proposal do relate to that school site. So there have been changes to the conditions of draft plan approval as it relates to the introduction of a school site. You will see in the proposed conditions as well some updates as it relates to just clarifying language. We've also added some standard conditions in that we apply more regularly to subdivisions. And so this was an opportunity to look at those conditions and to amend them where we felt was appropriate in consultation with the applicant and with town staff and applicable agencies. The zoning has similarly been reflected. So what we are proposing on the school site specifically is what we refer to as a compound zone. It's not used very often in the town of Saugeen Shores, but a compound zone allows that either or option. So it could be built as a school and the applicable institutional zone would apply. Alternatively, if this doesn't end up being the school site, then it could be used for high density residential development and then would comply with the R4 zoning provisions. So at this time, we're looking for council's endorsement of the revised conditions, which I can then forward over to the county as the approval authority on the draft plan of subdivision. But we are also looking for council support of the zoning bylaw amendment, which is before you tonight as well. So I'll perhaps leave it there, and I'm happy to come back and answer any questions that council may have.
Okay, thank you. So we will now hear from members of the public and we'll begin with the applicant or their agent. And I understand that we do have Dave Aston on, who is the agent for the applicant. Oh, there he is, Dave. Take it away when you're ready.
Great. Good evening, Mayor Charbonneau, members of council. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to this. I'll be very brief tonight. We've been working very diligently with township staff and Karina and the school board on the modifications to the bylaw since the last public meeting. I can advise that as of late last week, there was an agreement of purchase and sale reached with the school board and Lower Delgan Estates Development. So that is in place as it relates to the school board block. That block was identified and sized through a number of discussions with the school board. So they have confirmed that that block satisfies their requirements for the type of school that they're looking for within this area to serve these lands and really the surrounding area. So that's good news since the last meeting, where you may recall the letter was just that the school board was potentially looking for a site. Other than that, I think the modifications are really there providing just a different mix of housing that we had planned for in 2011. A lot has changed in the broader subdivision plan since then. Many of you will recall there was a zone change for some apartments off of Devonshire. There was a zone change for an apartment block off of Waterloo Street. So there's been some change to the plan, and what we're looking at with this modification is there's another block proposed for multiple residential, which probably will be more like a cluster townhouse. So that's kind of replacing what at one point in time was identified as a lifestyle condominium block. So again, a lot's happened since 2011. And some of the changes in the zoning bylaw reflect the opportunity for some lots just a little bit smaller maybe than the rest of the subdivision. Not too small. We're still talking about lots for double car garage, but just another option for housing choice to add to what really is a, a, a good subdivision that has a good mix and has been fairly successful. And we're just trying to respond to the market to move forward and finish off the last phases. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move on now then to comments from members of the public who are either in support of the application or with questions, comments, or concerns. And I do have one individual listed in front of me, Anne Howitt. So if we can bring in Miss Howitt. She's there. Oh, there she is. There you are, Miss Howitt. Take it away whenever you're ready.
Thanks for allowing me to participate. I moved here in May of 2024, so I wasn't privy to any of this previous conversation. And I live at 1091 Waterloo, which is the only freehold townhomes in this general vicinity, I'm guessing. From what I understand, the rest of the houses on this street are all condos. So they afford the luxury of some maintenance, which we don't get. So the theme of my conversation is safety, road maintenance, and all sorts of things that I don't think were taken into consideration when clearly you weren't going to have a school in the corner here. So today was I have had more snow removal today, period, than I have had all winter. And I'm not sure if it's because of the letter that I sent in last week on Friday, which I also should say is the day I received the letter about this meeting. Although the letter was dated February 3rd, I received it February 14th, and several of my neighbors never received it at all. So in this block of houses, these townhomes, these freehold townhomes, I think there's 14 or 15, they are now all sold. And I thought that perhaps we weren't getting snow removal and we weren't getting our sidewalks cleared because nobody thought anybody lived here. And as of February 14th, they're all sold. But 3 fellows in this neighborhood have been doing the sidewalks the whole time because nobody has ever touched them. The snow removal stops at the super mailboxes, which would be across from, I believe, I'm going to say phase 8, I think. And so our road, we are in a bit of, I don't know, we have a real snow issue right here at this. Obviously, the whole town has snow issues right now, but because we have vacant fields across from us, and I don't know, I'm not from here, so I'm not sure what the wind has been like forever, but the snowbanks are so high and the road has been a single road all winter that up until today, you couldn't have 2 cars on this street. So people have gotten stuck in the side of the road, which should have been the other side of the road, because nobody plowed it. And so today a plow came by and cut off the edges and blew a huge amount of snow. So now the sidewalks are completely covered. So none of our guys will be able to do the sidewalks anymore. I'm assuming that this is a 2-part step from the town because the snowplow that came by said Saugeen Shores on it. Never seen him before. And he cut back. But so there's the snow. But my concern is this is a skinny little road that only has a sidewalk on my side of the road. Most of the children are going to be coming from the other side of the road, which doesn't have a sidewalk. I understand too that you're going to be continuing Waterloo Street as well as Bruce Street, but Waterloo Street out to 10, concession 10, and maybe you're going to put a light in there. I used to run a retirement home in Richmond Hill that turned into a shortcut, which I think my street's going to turn into. So people came wailing down the other street, as I think they will with Waterloo, to come through and cut through the subdivision to get to food basics or to get to the Independent or to get to the main drag of 21. So my questions, where's the loading zone and unloading zone for kids? Is there ample parking in this parking lot for teachers and students? Are you taking into consideration all the parents that are going to be lining up, picking up their kids before and after school? How are these kids getting from that side of the road to my side of the road? Is there a crosswalk? Is there school zone signs? Is there a crossing guard? Are there speed bumps? Because to me, these were homes, and surprise, surprise, I'm one of the youngest ones in this subdivision. My neighbors, several of them to my left and right, are in their 80s and 90s. It just, to pull out of our driveway right now, you are putting your life in your hand because the snowbanks are so high. And as I said, the roads have been completely ignored all winter. So I just think for us, for the children, for the parents, and then for the huge construction site that's going on behind me right now, I'm not sure if the street is wide enough for all the stuff that's going on here, or if all of this has been taken into consideration. Do I have anything else? Maybe you need a snow fence across the road where there's just chain link, so all this wind doesn't come whipping across the street, because there has been zero visibility from my front door to across the street for weeks now. And I haven't phoned the town because every time I think about phoning, I think, oh, it's such a terrible day. They're going to listen to this crazy woman on the phone and think, who's calling the town to say they have snow issues? But truly, it's been going on for months. And then my last comment is about the pond. There was a wonderful piece of pile of sand where all these sparrows were living, which was taken down by the builder. There's a huge pond behind the brew pub, beside the Independent, that's full of geese and ducks. And I'm just wondering if the has been involved in what's going to go on to take that pond away, if it's going to be taken away. Um, and I just wanted to again reiterate that we are not condos. These are freehold homes, and we are taxpayers like freehold homeowners. And I don't want to know what happened today to make things better, but whoever fixed it, thank you, and I hope it continues.
Okay. All right, thank you, Ms. Hutt. And so you asked a few questions there, and I'll put them to the planner and to members of staff as appropriate. The first, as I understand it, is there's a few questions, but they all related to parking at the school and how parents would be accommodated dropping kids off, and also the folks who work at the school and all those things. Do you have any comments to that, the planner?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. So the school board, when they had written requesting opportunity to review a site in Summerside, had identified a minimum size requirement. And my understanding is they have been working with Lord Elgin Estates to find that appropriate size. So the block specifically where the school site is proposed is just over or just under 3 hectares. The school, the ministry requirements for a school with the projected population here looking at 409 pupils would be a site 5 acres in size. So they are exceeding the requirements from the ministry. And so within that site, they would need to ensure that they are providing appropriate off-street parking, meeting the zoning bylaw requirements for parking requirements for an elementary school. They would also need to abide by the loading requirements in the zoning bylaw as well. So at this time, I have not seen a conceptual plan for how that school would be laid out, but they would be required to comply with the institutional zone requirements.
All right, thank you. So the next question from Ms. Howitt was about pedestrian access to the school, sidewalks, crossing guards. How do we envision the new subdivision working to enable kids to get safely to school?
Yes, thank you for that question. So there are conditions of draft plan approval that look at the provision of sidewalks along roads, and it does depend on the classification of that road. So if it's a local road, it's typically a sidewalk on one side. For more major streets, there's opportunities to look at sidewalks on both sides. So Waterloo Street is considered to be a collector road. And so there would be a desire to have a sidewalk on at least one side of the street, if not both. There are also through the Summerside development linear parks that also make the connection east-west across the Summerside development as well. I don't have specifics in terms of details relating to crossing guards and crosswalks, but my understanding through detailed design, the proponent will be working with the town in that regard. I believe Mr. Aston has his hand up as well.
Yeah, Mr. Aston. You're on mute there, Dave.
Sorry, thank you. And through you, just in addition to Karina's comments, Waterloo Street is a planned collector road. It is planned with sidewalks on both sides. The reason the sidewalk is not on the opposite side of Miss Howitt yet is that sidewalk would be constructed through the future development of that block of land. So that block of land is planned for development, and that site plan and that planning included the construction of that portion of the sidewalk. As Waterloo extends north with the plan that's being proposed now, the developer would continue to construct sidewalk on both sides, because it would be kind of a public frontage along the way. And there has been discussion and timing associated with the completion of Waterloo Street, and construction of the school, probably something that will be coordinated with the town. And the conditions of draft approval, I think, will provide for the opportunity for that coordination to occur.
Okay, and Ms. Howitt's final question was to do with the storm water management pond and how it will be handled in terms of its removal, and how or if the MOE would be involved in that. And I see the manager of development services. Do you have a comment to that?
I do. I can answer that. Certainly, that pond is owned by the town. If it's described as behind the brew pub and the daycare, that's the town-owned pond that takes water from the business park on the other side of the highway. As a matter of fact, Ministry of Environment has given us the certificate of approval, but there are no plans to convert or reduce that pond at all. It's meant to remain as a pond as long as it's needed to provide stormwater works for the business park on the east side of the highway.
Okay, thank you all for your answers, and thank you, Ms. Howitt, for your comments and your questions. Are there other members of the public who are wishing to speak to council on this file? I'll ask the planner and the clerk.
Through you, Mayor Charbonneau. There are no other members of the public who are in attendance over Zoom this evening.
Okay, thank you. And are there any written submissions that were not already discussed in the planning report presentation or oral submissions?
So there was one letter that was received, and that was circulated to council. It was a letter from Ms. Howitt, actually. So that is going to be attached to the minutes, and will be available for the public to see at that meeting. Ms. Smith may be able to speak more, but it is my understanding it's also been attached to the file for when this comes as part of this matter.
Okay, thank you. I think all members have received that. And does any member wish to or need to have that read into the record? You've all had a chance to see it? Yes. Okay. Okay, so that's that then. So now we will ask if there are questions for the planner or the applicant from members of council. The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Dave, thanks for your presentation, Karina. Dave, on your mapping, the proposed draft plan showing amended phases 11 and 12, the full version attached, is the current stormwater retention pond behind the daycare center directly west? Is that would that be right beside phase 11? Have I got my mapping correct? It's just not shown on there, but it'd be right beside phase 11. Is that correct?
Through Mayor, that's correct.
And I thought I read somewhere in your report that you're proposing new stormwater retention ponds elsewhere. Where is that correct? Where would they be on your mapping?
Through Mayor, so immediately kind of opposite of that pond, so at the far east of the lands, there's a block for a stormwater management pond.
Which block is that?
Sorry if I can,
Yeah, the Manager Development Services.
I think what you mean is the west is close to the ridge.
Sorry,
There's a
west.
Yeah.
Oh, to the right. I see it now. I see it now. So it's to the west. Got it. And it's fair to assume, with the snow street sidewalk snow plowing, there are not a lot of sidewalk snow plowing happening in that particular area right now where is how it spoke to. But once if and when a school was proposed for that area, it would no doubt speed up our snow plowing for sidewalk processes. I mean, it's not there now. I don't believe sidewalks are being plowed in that area. Are they, Jay, or would you be able to answer that, Jay?
Manager Development Services.
Yeah, certainly I can confirm the sidewalks are not being plowed
Yeah.
in that area.
Great.
And just as a reminder to council and a way of informing the community is that the regularly operations brings winter maintenance plans to council. So
Yeah.
you'll have an opportunity to comment on the
Great.
maintenance procedures
And
at that time.
we've heard in the past where once we reach that 10-kilometer threshold, where new requests have come in and we add a sidewalk snowplow but if a school was built there, Dave, or Jay, but it'd be pretty obvious to us to council that sidewalk snowplowing would happen that close to a public school. Correct?
Well, I didn't know if it was a question. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, we're certainly quite a few conversations with the board and how their site needs to operate, how it interacts with
Yeah.
the communities, our facilities, both the concession 10, the highway, a traffic study. There's lots of things that still need to go to tell us how to
Right.
properly support the school services that go on there.
Just a few other things, Mr. Mayor. I like the modified subdivision design. I really like, and Dave passes on to Brad Pride. I really like the trail linkages, the trail system, the linear parks that he's developed over in the Summerside area. That whole set of tablelands in through there with the linear parks is wonderful. And I remember that coming to council many years ago, and council was very supportive of those linear parks. And I think we have Summerside Park. I see there's no provision for parkland dedication because I guess stab me with this is Jay, but Jay, what we're saying is that no provision for another park playground per se, not talking about linear park trails, but parks with swings and slides. Because it's with 800 meters, there's Summerside Park. Is that the reasoning why there'd be no further provision for swings and slides? That's a big, there's a lot of hectares in that section of property, but is that the reasoning because it's within 800 meters?
Well, I guess if I may, Mayor, this is wouldn't how I answer it. No, I guess I'd say when we originally planned this subdivision with the developer 12, 15 years ago now, I guess there was a main central park, which is Summerside Park operating. It would serve the entire subdivision. And the linear parks would provide connectivity through to the central park, but also east-west corridors at
Right.
regular intervals. So the first one is at, just north of Devonshire. The next one is just north of, I guess, phase 10. I'm not sure what number we're at now. And then the final one would be a active transportation route along concession 10, a la what's already exists at Bruce Road 25. There'd be
Right.
that separated and they would provide connectivity to other park facilities and features like the woodlands down to on the ridge or on the
Right.
east side, the aquatic center, et
Right.
cetera.
So one thing I'd like to mention, Mr. Mayor, to Dave, to staff as well, and to the Blue Water District School Board with that new elementary school, which is wonderful news for Saugeen Shores. Let's hope it moves forward. is that let's hope that that school site does have a playground. Because yes, we have Summerside, but it's a fair distance for a walk for those residents in that area to get to Summerside if you're in the furthest point away. So I'd like to think, Mr. Mayor, that the school, I just want to put it in, make it noteworthy that there should be a playground. Obviously, there will be with the elementary school, and hopefully that'll be something that can be used off hours, weekends, evenings. The other thing I wanted to mention, Dave, and pass this on to Mr. Pride, I think that 5 meter transfer of land for concession 10 is just golden. That's a key transportation route, active transportation route, east-west from Highway 21 down to the water. Um, Dave, what portion of the lands on concession 10, and I believe it's block 86, where does that stretch from where to where, that the transfer of lands for block 86? Does it go right from would that go right from the current stormwater retention pond right to the most westerly part of the property? How much does that block include for active transportation?
Through Mayor, you're correct, Counselor. It extends across the entire length of the site. So from one pond all the way through down to the other
Yeah.
pond to the Ridge Trail.
Yeah, and that is just absolutely tremendous. And congratulations to you and Brad. I think it's just a wonderful contribution, transfer plans to the town, and that's 5 meters wide, Dave, and so that allow for paved bike shoulders on both sides, which is really tremendous. So I just wanted to commend you for that, and overall these modified subdivision redesign, I think it's really a solid plan. So thank you for the revisions.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Halpin and then Councillor Mayette.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. Just more of a comment. I'm happy with the changes to the plans and everything that have been proposed. I'm disappointed that the school is there. And, in schools today, the bus has to go to every school. So we've just added a lot of traffic because those buses are going to go right from, they're going to start right at Port Elgin or Port Elgin Saugeen Central, go to St. Joe's, they go up to the high school, and now they're going to go back down around there. And I think that they had a good opportunity to add that school on one of the several existing properties they had. They could have had it at the high school with Cameron Parkland. They could have had it at Northport with the land that we have there. And there's also such a thing as building up. So I feel like the school board is probably just saying this is the easiest funding model. They're taking up 5 acres of prime housing land. I'm just disappointed at the location of the school, and I think it was short-sighted on the part of the school board. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I'll just remind members, and this is I violated this rule myself in the previous planning report, so I apologize. But let's focus on questions at this moment, and we'll come back to comments after I close the public meeting. Okay, so questions, Councillor Mayette.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. I looked over this draft plan of subdivision here, and I started to get thinking I was second guessing myself, but there's actually 3 different sections that are identified as phase 12 that I can see on there. But the one that we're most been talking about, the school, is the one in the top, be the northeast corner. Is that correct? And is that not exactly where the pond is now? I don't know if Dave can answer that or not.
Either whoever wants to take it, or maybe the manager of development services.
Well, I guess if I'm looking at the revised draft plan, I mean, I don't want to, besmirch the drafter here, but the phase 12 is just mislabeled there. The pond is where the phase 12 labeling is. I don't think it was intended to be labeled that. Phase 12 is the west side of sort of the development. Phase 11 is basically the school block.
Oh, just below phase 11 is phase 12.
Yeah, it's mislabeled. That's
Yeah.
outside the plan. So
Yeah. Oh, the plan's in the black, in the heavy black line.
the heavy black line. Yeah.
And the phase 12, that looks like an add-on on the far west side.
Well, I don't want to speak for the developer, but it's not an add-on. It was planned to be a subdivision at that time, but it's moved away from being this lifestyle community, which was sort of a nebulous, undefined retirement community into actually, streets and houses.
Okay. And then the other phase 12 is near the top. And I guess, like I say, it's a draft plan, subject to change.
Well, yeah, it's not subject to change. These conditions that are,
Oh,
if this is approved by the county, the conditions that are attached can be relied upon to develop it. How it gets developed, the details obviously matter, but the layout of the roads, the major blocks for development, those are going to be approved or considered.
yeah. All right. Then I think that's clear for me then. Thank you very much. So.
Thank you, Councillor Davinsky.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you and to you at this point. Um, I'm a little concerned about what Ms. Howard said about receiving a letter regarding this meeting just this past Friday. And I realize it was sent out February 3rd, but something happened between February 3rd and this Friday. And she indicated, we can't verify, that some people didn't get the notice at all. And this isn't the first time this has happened. I wonder if we, through you, could have staff look into this and find out what the issue was and why they were getting them late. Can we put a tracer on it? Can we put tracers on future mailouts of this type? I'm just trying to, I suspect we have to put it out a certain amount of time before the meeting, and this isn't being met. So I don't know who to direct that to, Mr. Mayor.
That's a good question. We'll put it to the planner, I think.
Yes, thank you for the question. So we did issue the notice for this meeting on February 3rd. I can't speak to the mail and how quickly it gets delivered. I can certainly take that back to our team and look into it. The one thing I did want to point out is that the statutory public meeting for this application was in August of 2023. So this is not considered a statutory public meeting. This is additional consultation with the public. And so the same timelines don't apply, but we did try to get the notice out as far in advance as possible to ensure that we did get people's mail. We did also double check because there had been so many changes in the subdivision and the potential for new people to have acquired properties in the subdivision since the original public meeting in 2023. We did do a recheck of our mailing list as well with town staff and updated it in accordance with information we had from MPAC as well to ensure that we are circulating and using the most up-to-date information as possible with that mail out.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you, Karina. And I wasn't challenging the county or anyone else. So you did your job. You had it out on February 3rd. I am challenging the post office. Were they still in strike mode by then? I can't recall. But in any event, February 3rd to February 14th, that's, to my mind, not very good service if we're trying to take care of our residents as far as communication goes.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Davinsky. Are there questions or comments? Questions at this point? Apologies. Questions only from members. Further questions? I just have a couple of questions. I wonder, so between phase 11 and phase 8, there's a block there that says future development. And I wonder, what is that? It's this very small, narrow block.
Yes, thank you through you, Mayor. So that block had originally been identified through the original draft plan as a potential street extension, but with some of the reconfiguration of the road network, it's still identified as a future development block, but it has been identified as lands to be conveyed to the town, maybe for a future linear park, a servicing connection, and so those lands are intended ideally to be transferred to the town and to be used for public purposes.
So can it be identified on the plan as something other than future development, something to make it clear that it's intended to be conveyed or as part of the linear? I think it makes sense, frankly, right there, since it's at the end of the rest of the linear park. So can that be changed?
We can certainly take that back. It is identified in the revised conditions of draft plan of approval that is a future development block, excuse me, to be conveyed to the town for servicing or a linear park purposes.
Okay, my second question is related to the rest of that linear park stretching up through phase 10 and then up it sort of crosses Spruce Street and then goes all the way to the ridge. When you look at that linear park and you compare it to the linear park that's down in the already developed area north of Devonshire, um, the linear part of that park is quite a lot wider in the previous, at least it appears wider, and I guess that's my question on my first question is this a much narrower right of way linear park than the one that was built that exists today um, in the already built part of the subdivision?
Thank you for the question, Mayor. I might ask if Mr. Aston might have some further insights on that. I don't have the history of the original linear park.
Well, whoever wants to take it, the manager development services.
Well, I was going to say, yes, they are narrower. It's about half as wide, but the town, when we evaluated it internal, we didn't think we needed a 15-meter wide trail. Most of our trails don't require that. And so for a way of getting a better designed subdivision at the north end, we were willing to take a little less trail land to accommodate the same feature.
Are we concerned at all? Because and you guys can tell me if I'm out to lunch here, but I assume it will be because it's between the backyards of two rows of houses that it will likely end up fenced on both sides, both east and west, and being quite narrow. Are we concerned at all about safety of the public using a trail that's fenced in like that and only and quite narrow? I don't know if it will. Are there plans with that it will be lit? I guess those are my questions. Are we worried about the safety of that trail?
Well, we are worried about it. We think about those things. And so there are walkway breaks, particularly west of Bruce Street. Maybe you might not think they're far enough, and we can certainly maybe have that chat with the designer. But then the longest one, 300-meter long one north of phase 10, during the site planning of that apartment complex, there were one or two connections to the trail. So there were breaks along that trail. So we were thinking that they were appropriately, sized. But if you have a particular, thing we should be looking at, I'm happy to take that comment. So
I'll save my comment for after we close the public meeting. The final question I had is about the what's the right word? The transition between this development and the 10th concession. We've talked about the 5 meters that's being conveyed, but is there more that's been planned in terms of landscaping or I mean, the 10th concession, once this is here, is going to be quite a prominent road, a lot of activity with both Bruce Street and Waterloo Street emptying onto it, and also the existing traffic heading down to the lake. It'll be a much busier road and the only east-west connection north of Green Street, I think. No, I'd be wrong about that. Market Street, probably.
Devonshire.
Well, no, I mean to the lake.
Oh,
It's the only one that crosses to the lake north of Market Street. Um, so it's going to be a busy street and a very prominent street. Is there something that either developer or you, manager development services, or the planner can tell me about what is being planned to create a buffer, some landscaping or whatever between that road and this development? Or will we just be looking at the backs of a bunch of houses?
well, I don't know if if I may, Dave, and I turn it maybe over to you if you have something to add, because I've been involved with the identification of this road since the initial development charges background study in 2008, and that concession 10 would be a collector road connecting sort of highway traffic to the lake. Yes, I acknowledge it's the only one north of Market. It is something we've been thinking about, but through successive long range planning of that feature, we've also tried to incorporate the separated bike lanes or active transportation route, the ATR, I guess we call it, the acronym that Mark hates so much. If he wants to acknowledge that, I'll ask him later. But that like how it was installed in Bruce Road 25, we'd have a separated active transportation route that can accommodate both pedestrians and cyclists, and that would provide a safe separation from the traveled vehicular traffic.
And,
I
and
understand my
just
question. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Aston.
sorry, Mayor Sharper, just to add in um, the blocks adjacent to concession 10, we do have an extra 10 meters of depth on those blocks to, give a little bit of extra room in some way to not have the homes right up to the street, but have a bit of a buffer from the street. And then also, I think as Mr. Posner was saying, as you get into the design of the 10th concession and a separated bike lane, there may be some opportunity for landscaping kind of on the township side and within that additional road width. But as we get into the design, it is something that we did have discussion on with the township that we'll work with the township as they start to move forward with design of the 10th concession as well. And maybe there's some we can look to making sure looking at different fencing, or there's a number of different alternatives we can look at for that interface with 10th concession.
Well, that's great. I'm glad to hear the developers committed to working with us to make that a good transition. All right. Are there any further questions before I close the public meeting? I don't see any, so give me half a second here. So it's hard to do this when I don't have Morgan there with printing all this stuff out for me. I have to figure it out for myself. Where do we go here? All right, I will now declare that the public meeting is closed. And so I will read the resolution. And the resolution is that council provide direction to the County of Bruce Approval Authority to approve major revision to draft plan of subdivision 41T-2011-0.144 Summerside by Lord Elgin Estates Developments Limited in accordance with the draft plan and conditions of draft approval attached, and that council adopt zoning bylaw amendment Z 2022-141 Summerside and bylaw 17-2025. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by the deputy mayor, seconded by the vice deputy mayor. Questions or comments from members? Well, we'll just make the comment now about that pedestrian, that linear park. I really do think we should take another look at that park. I'm concerned about the narrowness of it, and the existing one to the south is really great. It's nice and wide. It's wide open. And I think feels like it's a pretty safe place to be. I worry with a narrower path and the potential of it being fenced in that it might not be so safe, or might not feel safe, and that folks might not use it. So I worry about the narrowness of it, and I wonder if there's something we can do in this plan to remedy that. So it is an outstanding concern that I have. And the other comment, I'll just make my other comment, and then I'll let other folks speak. My other comment is to just speak to the school situation. I think it's great that we're going to get this school. We really need it, and I think I think that the school board has done its best to find a solution it can execute, and so I'm grateful for that. And I'm also grateful to the developer for working with the board to make this possible and make these changes. They didn't have to do that, but they did, and we certainly appreciate it. The only comment I wanted to make is that and it was raised by the member of the public who spoke, and it's an experience that we all have. The parking around our schools is a real challenge, and we have cars all over the streets around all the schools in Port Elgin in particular, and it's not great. And so we really, really, really need a site plan here that is going to accommodate all the traffic that that school is going to produce on site. And if that means building up, as Councillor Hilton suggested, or whatever, it needs to be done. I'm hopeful that our planning department will make sure that we have whatever provisions in place that we need to make sure that that happens, and that when we get to site planning, that although council doesn't control site planning, that our staff will make sure that those things are built into the site plan, because I really can't. I don't want to see us build another school here that has the same problems that the existing schools have in terms of traffic. So, but that's a net, it's a positive thing that we got the school on this site, and looking forward to getting that moved forward. So those are my comments, and we'll start with the deputy mayor and then the vice deputy mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, I would echo your interest and concern about the linear park pathway situation too, and certainly has density increases, and certainly, you know, as this development as this subdivision is built out, density has been enhanced along the way, which has some benefits for the community. But as that happens, you know, we need to have backyard type space for people living in multis and apartment buildings, and so the safety of that area is of great concern. So I echo what you're saying about taking a good look at just the safety of that and just the appeal of it all. I also wanted to, since this application or what we're talking about tonight has to do with a modified stormwater management facility, Ms. Howitt, when she spoke, she mentioned about some wildlife, birds, sparrows in particular, I believe is what she was talking about in this area. Stormwater ponds really have the potential to be natural features for very much an infrastructure purpose, but very important that, you know, they be built and created and maintained in ways that are as friendly as possible to wildlife. And so the mention of ducks and geese and sparrows, I'd like to think that this developer has changed over from a more linear type stormwater facility to something a little more traditional and more pond shaped per se, that, you know, there's still consideration given to making it function as much as possible as wildlife habitat, because the more we build out, the more we're losing those kinds of opportunities too. And I just wanted to take advantage of my opportunity here to echo something that the vice deputy mayor said about playgrounds and access. And as the mayor has just made some comments about encouraging the school board to take seriously, you know, their responsibility to create a safe environment in terms of parking and the movement of vehicles and the delivery and pickup of children. I think that as they build out a facility, you know, whatever they can do to create space that does have community use potential, and just make it so that people do have access in off hours, perhaps over the summer, to facilities that are in fact public facilities. And I know that's easier said than done, perhaps from the school board's perspective, but the vice deputy mayor is right. You know, we need to have swings and slides and playground facilities and space for kids to play wherever we can fit it in. And they have an opportunity to create that for the kids at the school, but community use of that facility would be appropriate too. But I appreciate the length of time it's taken to build out this whole subdivision has enabled Lord Elgin Estates to you know, pivot along the way to create some different environments and some different opportunities. And I appreciate that. I do hope that they take another look at the linear situation that you brought up, Mr. Mayor, because I think it has great potential beyond, you know, shrinking it down. We should make sure that it's still gonna do what it was meant to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, the vice deputy mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to the deputy mayor. Yeah, I did mention it during the first part of the meeting, and I should have left my comments to now. And but the importance of that playground at the school is important for staff to when negotiations do take place. We're able to use that playground not only during the evenings but weekends. Mr. Mayor, I want to draw to council's attention on block 76, and maybe Dave Aston can comment on this, but the 6 meter walkway, it says block 76. And then there's another block 74, 6 meter walkway. And it seems to me the linear park right directly below, attached to block 74, appears to be the same measurement, Dave. And six meters equals 19.6 feet, so 20 feet. And that's a fair that's a fair width. Our width for our trails right now is 3 meters, is what we allocate 10 feet. So I think 20 feet is probably a good number. But Dave, I'm just wondering if you could confirm that number, you or Jay or someone, to council in the next few days by email or through staff. But is that linear park in fact what I'm seeing, the same measurement as block 74 and 76? That linear park directly below block 74, in fact, is the same measurement, 20 feet? It looks like it's similar.
We can ask the planner.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. It looks like the linear park is 8 meters wide, just to the south of block 74.
That's what I'm looking at, and so that's almost like close to 28, 30 feet. But anyways, I think that your comment though, Mr. Mayor, is valid. I think the wider we can have our linear parks, the better. But 25 to 30 feet is a good width, even with fences on both sides. But I guess the narrower part, Karina, would be north of phase 10. That to me looks like that might be a little bit narrower. But can you confirm what that measurement could be, or could you get that to us, Karina? You can see phase 10, 330 units is the line there for linear park. Is that same thing, 8 meters?
8 meters would be the
Is it?
same.
Yeah, see, to me, that's, having 25, 30 feet is a good measurement, because I think the existing linear park that exists now, Summerside subdivision throughout that whole area, the linear parks, I think that's around the measurement. I think it's the same measurement, Mr. Mayor, around the 9 meters, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. Anyways,
I asked the manager of development services if it was narrower, and he said it was
okay,
significantly
well,
narrower. So I don't
I guess
know. Can we
it just
clarify
doesn't
all that to the manager of
it
development services?
just doesn't look narrower, that's all.
Well, we're looking at the quantum of the land, and what gets built in the case of the southerly trail, which is 15 meters, was left a lot of unused space on the side. Yes, it could be landscaped, but oftentimes it was just grass. It's more maintenance cost, and people start encroaching bit by bit. Which is why when we were consulted on this revision, we were willing to take a smaller linear park. We could still have the similar size trail, and it could still function the way we want. And that's why, so I'm just offering I would like to get a sense of the concern before any further. I'm not asking you to defer, but if there's something else to look at, we can do that right here. So
Thanks for that clarification. Who did I have next? I apologize. Or was there anybody next? I think I just would just add a comment that I accept that the actual travel portion of the trail is going to be the same, but that's not my primary concern. My primary concern is having that landscape buffer, that space around it that's open. I'm just concerned about. I guess what I'm saying is I like the one that's there. I think it's good. I think it's wide open, and I think it creates lots of feeling of lots of space around you and safety. And I worry about narrowing it up and having the fences even at, granted, sort of like it'd be sort of similar to being on the rail trail and having walls on either side of you. I just think that would be concerning to certain people, and I don't want people to be concerned. I want them to feel safe there. So I don't know. My hope would be that I think there's room probably to widen it. And that would be my one wish with this development would be to see that a similar linear park to the one is down near Devonshire. I don't know. I suppose if we approve this here today now, then it's approved, and that's how it stands. I don't know. Maybe the planner could add. Is there still a potential to look at that if we approve this today, or is it a done deal then?
through you, Mayor. So what I would suggest is if council is open to it, endorsing the plan as it is, staff can then take back that comment. There is always an opportunity to revise the plan again, and it doesn't necessarily need to be, if it's minor enough, it doesn't need to be a full circulation and a public process. There are opportunities for minor tweaks to happen in that process through a red line revision based on feedback that we receive today.
Thank you, Councillor Helpin.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. Could we put in a request for lighting along that trail? As like, because to me, the width of it, most of the time people are going to be on the paved area of it. And if you're concerned about safety, could we ask for lighting? Would that be a suitable response?
Maybe the planner could speak to it.
Yes, thank you through you. We can certainly take that back. I can discuss that with staff. I don't know what the town's standard requirement is for linear parks and lighting requirements. I'll perhaps defer to Mr. Posner.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I certainly just listening to the comments on this particular design, mitigation of concerns, lighting, fencing, other things to do, those can be definitely discussed at the design stage for the phase that we're getting at, and it be implemented through the approved drawings that come back to council when they do the subdivision.
I think that what the planner suggested is fair enough. We can, I'm content to approve it, and the developers heard this concern, and I'm hopeful I know they'll take it seriously and have a look at it and see if there's some ways to help us ensure that it's the kind of trail we want to have there for the rest of time, right? And that it'll serve those neighborhoods well. So I'm content with that, and hopefully my preference would be that they could revise it, but I'll leave that to them to discuss with the planners. Is there anything further on this before I call the question? I don't see anything, so I'll ask all in favor. That's carried. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I just need to shift gears here back to my agenda. I think I accidentally closed the agenda. So that wasn't very smart. Okay, Morgan, what's next on the agenda?
I have the site plan control application for Arlington Street.
Excellent.
768.
So we will move on to that. And who has the report? Oh, Candace Am has the report. Turn it over to you, Candace.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. A site plan control application for 768 Arlington Street has been submitted. This is for the construction of a 14-unit stacked townhome development. And this report is seeking your feedback on that development and also requesting to amend the 2025 budget associated with a sidewalk extension to be funded by the Development Charges Reserve. The lands are located at the northwest corner of the intersection of Arlington Street and River Street in Port Elgin. The 14-unit apartment will be a condominium development, and a separate condo exemption application will be submitted to the county for consideration following the site plan control approval process. The property is designated residential and has the compound zoning of light industrial and residential fourth density, which allows for the lot to be used exclusively for either use or as a combination of those permitted uses. The proposed 14-unit building is permitted under the R4 zone provisions. There are 18 parking spaces proposed to the north of the proposed building with access from Arlington Street. One parking space per unit is proposed, plus one space for every 4 units for visitor parking and one accessible parking space. The landscape open space area for the site is 35.1%, which exceeds the required 30%. The property is not within an area identified as having high archaeological potential, and consultation with SON has not been requested by the town for the site plan control application. Condominium developments are not eligible for the purpose-built rental housing exemptions listed in the town's development charges bylaw. So unless the developer pursues the provincial exemptions related to affordable or attainable housing outlined in the Development Charges Act, this proposal will be subject to development charges, and those will be calculated when the building permit is applied for. The materials provided with the site plan control application were reviewed, and preliminary feedback from the town has been provided to the developer. Those preliminary comments noted deficiencies in the site plan. There were engineering comments related to grading and drainage. There was a suggestion to establish pedestrian access to the Saugeen Rail Trail if feasible. There was a recommendation to extend the sidewalk from the Arlington Street, River Street intersection along River Street to the Saugeen Rail Trail. Requested a landscape plan, and overall design comments were provided. A second submission drawing set, including the site plan, is attached to this report, and that was submitted to address the town's preliminary comments and is still under review. The developer continues to work with the town to address the deficiencies noted. The proposal was presented to the Accessibility Advisory Committee. There is a subcommittee specific to site plan reviews, and there were no specific comments to provide to the developer following that presentation. There were general comments included on my report regarding design. So we are encouraging of infill developments, and this proposal will develop lands that are currently vacant and underutilized in Port Elgin, and they will connect to existing services. The proposal is well designed and cost efficient. The stacked townhome design adds diversity to the town's range and mix of housing types. The development is in an area that has an active transportation network, including the sidewalks and trails. And through the site plan process, the proposal is providing safe and barrier-free access to these existing networks. The proposed sidewalk extension from Arlington Street, River Street intersection will also enhance this network. Although the stacked townhome design prevents the units from being considered universal or age-friendly, there are paths and travel it's free from obstacles and obstructions on the site itself, and there are different tactile indicators to be installed where vehicular roadways are connecting to the site. The developer has taken into consideration the scale and massing and height of the neighboring buildings and has proposed a complementary design. The development encourages and supports active transportation, including sidewalks, trails, and the town's trail network in general. The standard agreement is proposed to be used, covering adherence to the approved drawings and other typical obligations relating to the maintenance of the site. The requirements for off-site work associated with the proposed sidewalk extension would be included in the site plan control agreement. Subject to comments from council, an agreement will be drafted once the final drawings are provided and all concerns have been appropriately addressed. This concludes my report, and I'm happy to take any questions from council.
Thank you. So there is a resolution that council approve an additional $15,000 plus HST in the 2025 budget for the River Street sidewalk extension funded by the Development Charges Reserve. Is there a mover and seconder for that? Councillor Halpin and the Deputy Mayor, and we'll go to questions, and we'll start with Councillor Grace and then the Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Oops, let's lower that. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Candace, thank you for the report and your work on this. I think it's sounds like a good project. I do have a couple of questions. One is, why isn't the developer paying for the sidewalk extension?
Thank you for the question, through you, Mayor Charbonneau. The request to have the developer design and construct the sidewalk was actually from town staff. So this is works that are exterior to the development proposal, and it wasn't included in the first submission of the proposal. So it was a suggestion of staff that this may be an opportunity to enhance our road network through that sidewalk. This area, and in particular this sidewalk, is not included in the DC background study. So it isn't in the current budget that we would do this sidewalk. With this development moving ahead, staff are seeing it as an opportunity, and if council so wishes, it's an opportunity to have a sidewalk constructed where there isn't one that exists now to improve safety in the area.
Okay. I mean, I think it's a good idea to have a sidewalk there, especially with the close proximity of the rail trail. But yeah, I have to trust that you guys know exactly what this is, what's proper in this case. So I accept that. I have a question about the landscaping plan too. So the plan as shown proposes something called a katsura tree and 3 Japanese maples. And I looked these up and they're not native trees. They're lovely trees, but they're not native. And then you sent them design guidelines that are included in this material, which gives a list of recommended native trees. And that list doesn't include Japanese maples and the katsura. So what do you think about, I mean, I thought one of our goals was to encourage the use of native trees. That's why we go to the trouble of having that. That was something in the recommendation of our urban tree canopy plan. Those trees are more resilient and have more success in terms of planting and endurance. So are you amenable to redirecting the developers to make that change?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Charbonneau. Yes, of course. We provided preliminary comments back to the developer that did include the recommendation of preparing a landscape plan that had native tree species. This plan was submitted and is under review by staff, and we welcome any feedback that we can submit back to the developer to see native species included.
Thank you.
Okay, the Vice Deputy Mayor, then Halpin, then the Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your report, Candace. I'm pleased to see that there's 35.1% landscaping for open space. That's exceeding our 30% requirement, so that's good news. The message is getting out that landscaping is important to our community, and I see there are 9 trees. I did have a question about the types, but it's been asked by Councillor Grace. The one thing I wondered about, it's good to see 14 stacked townhouses. Something is needed. Though hopefully the price point would be good for our residents in our community. That missing middle, we'll see. Do you know about the snow removal, the snow storage, Candace? Are you concerned at all, or maybe I'm not seeing, or maybe I'm not reading it correctly, but is there provisions on in the plan for snow storage for that parking lot where snow would be moved to, well, we know where it's coming from, but to where? Snow storage?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Charbonneau. That is a good question. Oftentimes on the site plan drawing, there'll be a note that indicates, particularly because this will be a condominium development, that snow will be collected and removed from the site. So I can ensure that if there isn't a specific snow storage area noted on the site plan, that note will appear to indicate that snow is intended to be removed from the site.
I think that's positive that it'd be included in a future plan, Candace. That's good to hear, because I just couldn't find it, and so assuming they're going to remove it off the site. So but that'll be included in the future plan. So that's all I have for Mr. Mayor. Thanks.
Okay, I have Councillor Halpin, then the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you, I'll direct this question to Candace. Before in reading it, I had come up with a figure, what it said there, the development fees, the DCs would be on that. And I can't seem to find that figure now, but do you have that figure?
I do. So these are proposed to be 2-bedroom units, and there are 14 of them. So there's the town portion, and we also collect the county portion of the development charges. So per unit, it's $23,907.97. That's the 2025 fee. So in total, $334,711.58.
So that's a substantial payment, and so I have no problem taking, development is paying for development, and his development fees, where they may not be directly going into that sidewalk, but that's what we draw these fees from to build those. So I'm I'm happy to add to that sidewalk. I'm echo the Vice Deputy Mayor's comments that it was so nice to see the 35% green space. They look like an attractive building. It looks like it's, as we say, we need a variety of housing. And this is working to supply that variety. I'm sorry, that's a comment, but anyways, that was
Sometimes you
my,
can make comments, no problem.
okay.
You're all right now.
Yeah, I just wanted to find out and acknowledge the great amount of development fees that he is paying, and I'm glad that we can accommodate and help put that sidewalk in. Thank you.
Thank you, the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, I have a couple of comments based on things that others have said. Just to follow up with what Councillor Halpin just said about development charges. Candace did mention in her report that the proponent does have the potential to pursue the exemptions through the provincial legislation. Important to note that that involves, if they choose to go down that route, that involves a 25-year commitment to a very specific kind of rent situation that, if they choose to go that route, I don't know if we've had one in our town before, but there is potential for development charges exemption here, but it would require that they commit to a very long period of time to keep those units affordable according to a provincial formula. I wanted to very specifically congratulate Candace and whoever else was involved with making sure that the developer paid attention to the public land and the public access lands that are near this site. So the information in the report that was specific to making sure that drainage issues didn't impact the rail trail and, improving opportunities for the people perhaps in this development to access the rail trail, in many ways protect our investment in the rail trail. And I just want to acknowledge that it's always nice to see language and conversation in reports that reflects that those things are being paid attention to going forward. I do have a very specific question related to the sidewalk, but in response to Councillor Grace's comment about the Katsura tree, no, it's not a native tree, but I can attest to the value of a Katsura tree in a landscape. There's one planted at my dad's property. It's adjacent to one of the entrances into the annex at the curling club in Southampton. It's a beautiful columnar tree, fits a nice space, throws some shade, heart-shaped leaves that change color 3 times during the season. It's a very attractive tree. It is not native, does grow well here though. So just throwing a little love towards the Katsura. I wanted to ask a question though about the sidewalk. I appreciate that Candace mentioned that, it was a town sort of generated or initiated request, and the comment went to the developer to get them to provide a sense of what the cost would be and to have them construct it as they were doing their project. And so we have this $15,000 plus HST amount. I'm struggling with the comparison to the last time we saw something related to a sidewalk that was going to be funded from the development charges reserve. In that case, we had I believe even a shorter stretch of sidewalk, and the intention was that the developer would build it, but the price tag we received on it was, I believe, $65,000 or $70,000. So I'm just concerned that the differential in the pricing of sidewalk contributions when they're going to be funded from the development charges reserve, there should be some similarity there. So it's a big enough discrepancy for me to just be concerned that why are we being told that one stretch of sidewalk, which is not in my opinion, it wasn't a very long stretch at all. It was $65,000 and the developer was going to do it. But we were asked them for pricing. That's the pricing that they gave us. And then when we did it with this one, they're going to do it, but the pricing that they've given the town is $15,000. I just would hope going forward that there is some consistency. And also that, the discrepancy shouldn't be that much, in my opinion. So I just want to express some concern. I'm very grateful that there'll be an extension of the sidewalk, and I'm glad that the developer is willing to do it. And, the pricing seems very good based on what I believe from budget conversations when we hear a dollar figure per meter of sidewalk to install. I think the pricing is very good here, but it doesn't hold up very well with the last time we saw the exact same kind of request. Anyway, that's a concern. And I just hope that going forward, we see a little more consistency with that, should we see it again. Thank you.
I think the Development Service Officer has a comment there, Candace.
Yeah, I think it will be difficult to have that consistency because every stretch of road is different. I don't want to necessarily get into the specifics to compare to a different proposal because I'd like to keep it focused here. But what I'm seeing is that it's a very flat area, that I don't believe there are any ditches here. Where the services are located will also factor in as to whether or not the services are on one side of the street or the other, whether there are fire hydrants that are already installed. So what I can say is that the proposals do come forward and are then reviewed by our engineering staff. And so they're looking at the cost estimate and giving me feedback from our own town engineers to say, is this appropriate for the site? So the discrepancy, I think, is based on external factors, not just the actual physical materials and work involved.
Okay, fair enough. Are there further questions or comments from members? I'll just say I think it's an excellent proposal. 14 stacked townhomes. I mean, fantastic development, and then getting that connection to the rail trail for everybody in that neighborhood. Another great development is part of it. We're picking up a lot of great stuff with this development, I think, and I really want to congratulate the developer and on the DC discussion just briefly, because it's hot on my mind because I was listening to the provincial leaders debate last night, and lots of people running down development charges. But here, an example of how if you deliver something, you can get DC exemptions. And I think it's a great way to use development charges. We collect them, but in our case, it has to be purpose-built rental. You deliver us purpose-built rental, you get DC exemptions, because that's what we're looking for. And as the deputy mayor pointed out, these guys want to get provincial exemptions, they deliver something on affordability for an extended period of time. I mean, that's the way to make development charges work, to both pay for some infrastructure and incentivize affordable and attainable housing. So I think anyway, it's an interesting discussion, and apologies for the diversion, but I've been thinking about it since last night. Anyway, I think yes, I did. I read the resolution, and it's been moved and seconded, so I'll ask all in favor. And that is carried. Thank you. Okay, so the second one, 7.2, is comments on the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority's policy manual, and we'll turn that back to Candace for some comments.
Thank you, Mayor Charbonneau. This is quite a lengthy report, so I will do my best to just condense it for you. The Conservation Authority has proposed an update to their environmental planning and policies regulation manual, and this report outlines the comments from the town that will be considered and then passed along to the authority. I will note that I have inadvertently used an out of date term throughout my report. So as a point of clarification, where my report refers to the SVCA Board of Directors, it is intended to mean the gathering of the Conservation Authority members acting as the authority. The SVCA describes the policies manual as a cornerstone document outlining their approach to environmental planning and regulatory responsibilities. And the updated manual is intended to reflect changes in legislation and to comply with the Conservation Authorities Act, Ontario regulations as well. There are a number of topics in my review that are related to or affect the local context for Saugeen Shores, which are numbered in my report. The first of those is the Planning Act priority and planning prior planning approvals. So the point here is that they are bringing forward language from the previous manual that essentially indicates that the principle of development is preferred to be established through the Planning Act, and that the Planning Act approvals are to be secured first and the SPCA permit approvals second. The continuation of these policies is particularly critical for areas of Southampton where we have updated flood hazard mapping. The new mapping is precluding development, and we look forward to the SPCA working diligently with the town and the impacted developers to resolve this issue. So recommendation number one is that the town is supportive of the draft EPR policies as it relates to Planning Act priority and prior planning approvals. And the second recommendation is that the EPR policies manual should refer to the dispute resolution procedure that's found in the Memorandum of Agreement of Planning Services between the county, the SPCA, the Grace Sawable Conservation Authority, and the Maitland Valley Conservation Authority. The second item is the vision, goals, and principles and provincial standards. So the draft manual indicates that the SPCA will focus on mandatory programs and services for natural hazard planning and deliver on legislative responsibilities, providing clear direction to the watershed municipalities to distinguish between recommendations and requirements. The continuation of these policies is appropriate to ensure that natural hazards in the town are managed in a consistent manner in accordance with provincial standards, and so that the town is provided with clear direction. This is particularly critical again as the town continues to explore the implementation of a two-zone floodplain management concept for areas of Southampton impacted by the updated flood hazard mapping. The third recommendation in my report is the town to support, the draft policies as relate to the SPCA approach to natural hazard management and provincial standards, apart from the policies related to climate change, which are discussed in more detail below. Under the third point, which is the request for review, this is Appendix C in the draft policies manual, which is the administrative review policies. There are a number of items that I have noted in the chart within my report. To briefly summarize those, the SPCA has either already delegated or is seeking to delegate administrative review powers to the general manager, secretary, treasurer. And the language is suggesting that the request for review is something that's initiated by staff, where really that ability is with the applicant. In terms of timeline, the policies in the manual have been drafted to allow the SPCA to circumvent the 30-day timeline for review that is specified in the regulation, where they're asking in extenuating circumstances to allow for more than 30 days for that administrative review, which isn't permitted in the regulation. And the other item is that when they've established, or they're looking to establish in their draft manual evaluation criteria in terms of the completeness of an application, whereas the regulation is specifying that the applicant can disagree with its authority's determination that the application is incomplete, and that can be the basis for the request for review. So the wording in the draft manual suggesting that there wouldn't be an opportunity to request that in evaluating a request for review, the completeness of an application is a factor, which I believe would circumvent the process entirely. So the ensuring that the manual is aligned with the regulations made under the Conservation Authorities Act will better serve the town. And it is under the framework that the town and other applicants of the community would not be, if they implement the policies as drafted, we would not be afforded the opportunity to approach the authority in instances where the applicant is in disagreement with the determination of the general manager, secretary, treasurer on the completeness of the application or the studies required in support of an application. My recommendation number 4 is that the draft policies manual be revised to align with Section 8 request for review of the Ontario Regulation 4124, and also that the request for review powers remain the responsibility of the full authority and not be delegated to the general manager, secretary, treasurer. Recommendation 6 is that the dispute resolution procedure for permit applications submitted to the SPCA should be set out in the policies manual. This is an area that's lacking in the report. There are dispute resolution framework for Planning Act applications, but not for the permitting process. And that in that dispute resolution procedure, specify that in the event that a dispute between an applicant and the SVCA staff cannot be resolved, that there is an opportunity to submit that dispute to the full authority for review. The fourth item is minister's powers. This is relatively new, but there are changes in legislation that haven't been accounted for in the draft policies manual, where the minister now has the powers to prevent the Conservation Authority from issuing a permit and take over the permitting process, and also to review a Conservation Authority permit decision at the request of the applicant. So regulation just came into effect January 1 of this year that sets out the circumstances where the minister may use these powers. And really it relates to items that the minister considers to be, that the ministry considers to be of provincial interest, mainly housing, community services, infrastructure, jobs, and any other matters that in the opinion of the minister is of provincial interest. So it is important to the town and its residents to be aware that there are other alternative options outside of the SVCA permitting process to facilitate the review and approval of development proposals within the SVCA regulated area. And so the recommendation is that the policies manual should include a section on the minister's powers. The fifth item is climate change. There are multiple references throughout the draft manual that relate to climate change and preparing for the impacts of a changing climate. The draft manual indicates that there is not a specific reference in the Conservation Authorities Act or the regulation to address climate change and its impacts, and that the legislative authority and section 1.3 legislative authority found within the draft EPR manual also does not reference climate change. The PPS seems to indicate that preparing for the impacts of a changing climate appears to be the sole responsibility of the planning authority without consultation with conservation authorities. The ensuring that the manual is focused on the delegated roles and responsibilities of the SPCA is of the opinion would better serve the town. So recommendation number 8 is that the draft EPR policies manual be revised to align with the SPCA's mandate and roles and responsibilities related to climate change. Then there are a list of other items that have been found. Some of these are just edits and corrections that need to be made, but I will highlight a few from this list. Clarification that the SPCA does not play a role in deeming Planning Act applications complete. Ensuring that the Southampton Dynamic Beach Study is included in the appropriate sections of the manual, as other dynamic beach studies in other areas that have been studied have been included in the manual, but there is very little mention of Southampton itself. Clarification on the delegation for the request of review powers to General Manager, Secretary Treasurer, I've already noted above. And also that there is a process for appealing decisions of the SPCA to the Ontario Land Tribunal, and ensuring that their information is included in the policies manual for the proper process for that through the e-file portal. So in conclusion, there are a number of items that have been flagged by staff. And in order for the town to be supportive of the draft manual, we are requesting that those revisions be made. And the final recommendation is that a revised draft of the environmental planning and policies manual be circulated to stakeholders for further review prior to advancing to the authority for approval. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. There is a resolution that council endorse the comments in this report and the attached stakeholder feedback form and forward them to the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority for inclusion in the consultation. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Gray, second by Councillor Davinsky, and I will take questions or comments. And I see Councillor Mayette and then Halpin. Oh. You still there, Dave?
Okay, there we go. Oh, my video went off. There we go. Yeah, Candace, what a report. You must have been spending many, many hours on this, going through this complicated subject in such extreme detail. And so thanks for that. I tried as best I could to go through and understand the context for each of your recommendations, and some of them certainly make sense. Some that I wasn't sure about, particular the one about the delegation of powers of review to the general manager and secretary treasurer. I'm not sure that the delegation is made to them to decide on whether an application is complete or not complete through that Section 8 process. In fact, in actual practice, every month when we go to the board, or through the authority rather, for our monthly meetings, there is a statutory or a standing item that, or is actually a set aside time prior to the regular board meeting for listening to those hearings, those Section 8 hearings. So it's customary for the authority to hear those applications, or those rather challenges to applications. So I think it's the only part that the Secretary Treasurer and General Manager would be doing would be ensuring that those make it onto the agenda, and that the meeting is properly statutory meeting is properly attended, and that required agendas are circulated in the proper time, and that the applicant is made aware and able to respond or make their case to the board. And that is what happens. And the other part about the 30 days, certainly the 30 days is afforded so that both parties can have enough time to prepare themselves. But there are situations where information is missing, or the weather doesn't allow a meeting to take place, such as today. There are times when those get delayed. And the last one I recall was delayed on the request of the applicant, that he or she was reviewing some of the information, and in fact they were able to solve the issue before it came to a hearing. So the 30 days is certainly an expedited timeline, and every effort is made to adhere to it. But I'm not sure that it's flaunted in any way like that. The other item that jumped out to me was the minister's guidelines, and certainly I don't think the authority was particularly pleased when the minister reviews were added to that. It was seen as an undermining of the authority of the conservation authorities. But I think you're right. I think I will support the idea that it should be mentioned in there, so that an applicant, I think earlier on, the mayor said if there's a law and we have to make it available for people to know what their rights are in a concise and comprehensive manner as we can. So having those appeal processes outlined in there, I don't think are a bad idea. So I think I'll support that one, and the rest of them. I think you've nailed them on the head, and as they apply to Southampton and the revised floodplain mapping, certainly our situation in Southampton is rather unique in that the floodplain mapping is so extensive. Yet there is going to be exceptions for developers to work within those areas. That it's good that what you've suggested there is going to allow that to happen a little easier, I believe. So those are my comments. And once again, thank you, Candace, for your obviously extensive work on this. And I will leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Halpin, and then Councillor Grace.
Okay, thank you, Mayor, and through you. And thanks to my colleague Dave, you covered a couple of the points that I had done, and so there's no need to go back over them again. Just with the issue about the discussions on climate change and everything like that, I don't want us to be getting into kind of the situation where we're seeing in the States, where the government is telling the National Oceanic and the NOAA and different groups like that, well, you can't talk about this now, or you can't talk about this, or you can't talk about that. I think climate change is a real thing that's happening, and I would propose a question this way. Do you think climate change affects a watershed?
Is that a question for?
Sure, that's a question. Does climate change affect a watershed?
Candace.
I absolutely do think that it affects the watershed, and that as per the Conservation Ontario mandate, conservation authorities play a supporting role. I'm not seeing where it's part of their primary mandate that they will have consideration for climate change when making recommendations on Planning Act applications. So that is the point that I'm trying to express with my comments in my report. Not that they don't play a role, because I think collectively we all play a role. However, I'm not seeing where they are mandated specifically to have that as part of their lens when they're reviewing applications.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And I'll agree to disagree with you on that. And I don't want us to be seen to be constantly muzzling. So those are my comments. And I'm eager also to see what the Saugeen Valley Conservation staff, to see their response to your responses also. I agree with a lot of the things, and it's a good report, and I agree with a lot of the things that you said, and I do agree with the making everything kind of simpler and easier to use. But I'm very eager to hear what the Saugeen Valley Conservation staff has to say as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Candace. This is a really fine report, and I think the majority of your suggestions are good. I was kind of surprised to see the comments about the town's concerns about too much authority resting with the SVCA director, because when I looked at the processing of applications, there is an option that's discussed about saying that if somebody has questions about a permit application and how it's been handled, that they can request a review by the authority members. So maybe I'm just not understanding, what your concern is, because I did see that in the manual.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Charbonneau. There's a bit of uncertainty, to be honest. The policies manual has been drafted, where it says specifically, when I'm looking at Appendix C, the Administrative Review Policies under Section 6. It references the Conservation Authorities Act and the ability of the authority to delegate any of its powers relating to the issuance or cancellation of permits to a body. And then there's a statement that says, as such, the authority delegates the above administrative review powers to the Secretary, Treasurer, General Manager. And it says insert resolution number here. And so it's uncertain if this has already been done by the authority, that they have already delegated this power to the General Manager, Secretary, Treasurer, or if it is their intention to do so in the future. And so this is really about the review and the completeness of an application. And I would say the town itself has been an applicant, and it's my understanding that we have found ourselves in a situation where, as an applicant, we were in a disagreement with staff on the completeness of one of our own applications, and we're not able to find ourselves in front of the authority members to state our case. And so this is the concern, that there should be an opportunity to make that request and ensure that it goes to the authority members for consideration and not just be left at the staff level.
Okay, I understand. That's fine. I do think it's a good idea to recommend, and hopefully they'll take that up, to take the dispute resolution model that's used by the county. Should be exploring all of those models and see how they can be used. I do have a question at the beginning of your report. When you talk about there's a quotation that says, when there are historical planning approval decisions made in the absence of current technical information, which could preclude development under the Conservation Authorities Act. The SVCA will work diligently with the applicant and municipality to resolve the issue. So my question there is, how far does that historical planning approval decisions go back? My understanding is that the current act was passed in 1990. I may be wrong about that, I don't know. But could you elaborate on that, please?
Sure, through you, Mayor Charbonneau. So the concern is that specifically we have recent technical data for the floodplain for the town of Southampton. We also have draft approved developments in that area. And so the wording from the policies manual is indicating that those prior planning decisions, so that draft approval of that subdivision should stand. However, we're not always getting that same messaging from staff at this point. They're indicating that we have new technical information for the floodplain, and that they need to honor that new mapping, and they aren't able to allow for that draft approved development to proceed. And so really this is they are expressing in their manual that they will work with the developer in the town to ensure a resolution when these scenarios arise. In terms of historically, we have some very old draft approved subdivisions. So as far as my understanding would be is that anytime there has been a valid planning approval that was decided upon by an approval authority, that should stand, and that the Conservation Authority will work with the developer to ensure that the Conservation Authority concerns can be addressed, but also to allow the development to continue. And so it's really just reiterating the points from their own manual, what their intent is.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there further questions or comments? I have a couple of comments. I guess first, everyone has made the comment of how good a job Candace did on this report. Of course, she had the inside track. I have to say she's has a bit of an unfair advantage because she drafted the original version of this policy at the Conservation Authority. So there's nobody, frankly, potentially even among folks who currently work at the authority who know more about this manual than Candace Ham. So we're pretty fortunate, honestly, very fortunate to have Candace working for us and doing this review for us. And I think she's made some excellent observations about this draft manual and some of the things that are problems with it. The one, and Candace made the point right off the beginning about her use of the term board of directors in her report, which is right, and it's an easy mistake to make. Lots of people call it the board of directors, and it isn't. But what's concerning is that the manual itself uses the term several times. Like in Appendix D, the hearing guidelines, the authority is referred to as a board of directors several times in that section. We should include that as a comment. I mean, that should be fixed. There's a sneaking or creeping tendency at the authority to diminish the role of the authority itself. The Conservation Authority isn't like a municipality. It isn't an organization that exists with, like, the staff aren't part of the authority. The authority are 12 or 13 people who sit around the table. That's the Conservation Authority. That's all it is. And the staff, their job is to give recommendations to the authority, but all of the power to make decisions rests with the authority, the group of people who sit around the table appointed by the member municipalities. And it happens. They will, in drafting these policies, they will try to define you as a board of directors to diminish your ability to exercise that authority. You must resist that. As directors, you must insist on being referred to as the Conservation Authority. And then exercising those authorities that you have. And that means not delegating ever to the general manager. Because you see what happens. These guys, in some cases, if they love a thing, they'll push it right through. But in other cases, where their dogma disagrees with what's being done, they'll put it in purgatory and make it spin and spin and spin and spin forever. And you can't get out of it. And this policy, through this delegation, perpetuates that and creates a situation where applicants, if they're doing something that the individual regulations officer or the general manager doesn't like, they'll never find their way out of pre-consultation. They'll never find their way out of the administrative review. It'll just be endless. I know it because it happens and has happened. So it's frankly, the administrative review process is an unmitigated disaster, and it creates huge problems across our watershed and prevents good developments from moving forward on the basis of Lord knows what. And the authority needs to get in there and insist that it be able to exercise its authority and be the group that applicants can come to first in order to have a hearing in front of people who are elected and responsible for this watershed. I have an example, Gay Lee in Teeswater, right? If there was an application, it was there, they brought it forward, it spun and spun and spun until the authority itself came in and said, we must address this, bring it to us. We're going to review it. We're going to have a direct review of this policy, of this application. And staff said they couldn't support it, which was fine enough. Candace was involved in that. And the authority made the decision to permit it because the impact to the watershed, there was an impact to the watershed. There is an impact to the watershed of having Gay Lee expanded where it is. But the impact to Teeswater of shutting Gay Lee down would have been 1,000 times worse than that impact. And I'll tell you this, the impact to the town of Southampton, if the Conservation Authority has its way today and prevents development across most of the eastern portion of Southampton, because they're being too narrowly focused on not being flexible at all, and preventing good housing from getting built in Southampton. If that attitude is able to persist and we don't get the authority to step in and make some decisions to be flexible and allow housing to get built, they could sterilize half of the developable land left in Southampton, and that's the track they're currently on. So, we got to get serious about the Conservation Authority. These guys need to get reined in, and we need the authority, the members of the board who sit around the table. I call it a board. I did it myself. But the members of the authority who sit around the table, they got to insist that we are the authority. Bring these decisions to us. We're going to make decisions in the best interest, not only of the watershed, but of the communities that we represent. So don't delegate anything to your staff. Retain the authority, exercise the authority. And I think we should support all of these recommendations that Candace has made because they're good ones. They narrow the focus of the authority onto the things it's been directed to do by the province. That's the work they should be doing. And we should be insisting that they do it, stay focused on it, and we should be insisting that the authority, the power to make decisions rests with our elected representatives who sit there. So thanks for your work on this, Candace. I'm eager to support your recommendation here to see these moves. I would say too, just finally, I think it would be a good idea to circulate this to all of the municipalities who are part of the Conservation Authority, because I don't think anybody can do a better job of this than Candace, and they should all have a chance to see these recommendations and support them. I have a feeling they would get a great deal of support from the municipalities across the watershed. So I would suggest that we direct that this set of recommendations that Candace has drafted be circulated to all of the municipalities in the Saugeen Valley watershed. My thoughts, Councillor Halpin.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. I see your points, but we're often encouraged at this council to delegate, I feel, lots of authority to staff as well. So, we do that as well. Although I don't fundamentally disagree with you on that part. What I did want to say is I don't think you should characterize that the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority did that mapping to prevent growth in Southampton. That mapping can help us, and that mapping can fit in with the whole drainage plan we have from there. And from my conversations that I had with the at the time the acting director of Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority, was that floodplain. A lot of it is very shallow, and he showed me examples and just on the floodplain map, and he said, "Okay, you see this house here. I did the planning for that house. And this shows, he puts the map that it shows that flood level. The house is above it." I think that the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority wants to work with people to allow for development in that area. And the floodplain, the second stage of this floodplaining is really quite shallow. You're just talking about on a lot of houses of just raising the grade of around a foot to accommodate that. So I don't think it's fair to say that they're trying to stifle or they want to stifle growth in Southampton. I don't think they want to, and I want to see the growth in Southampton go, and I want it to go ahead in a way that people aren't having wet basements, and that we can do these things and we can do them properly. Thank you.
And I just to clarify, if I did not intend to characterize their intent, only to characterize the effect. And the effect, it's not only having done the mapping in the first place, it's their response to a series of attempts by the municipality through two-zone floodplain mapping, other efforts in order to mitigate that issue, and presenting reasonable solutions that have been vetted by experts that have been rejected by the authority. So with great respect, I think the authority is indeed stifling growth there through a level of inflexibility. I can't characterize their intent. I don't know what it is, but I do know the effect, and the effect is to, in my estimation, unreasonably prevent growth in Southampton. The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Candace, just wanted to compliment you, commend you on your work. That you just incredible, um, um, incredible amount of good work you did on it. And my question I have is, when these recommendations make their way through, Council Mayad and Council Helpman there at the table, when these come to the Conservation Authority, what are the next steps in terms of bending the ear of all 11, 12, 13 members of the authority versus staff? What are the next steps? How do these recommendations get before all 13? In the Mayor Charbonneau, rightfully so, has recommended that these comments all get sent to all 13 members, which I think is the right thing to do. So what are the next steps? Because these recommendations are pretty solid. And so who carries the big stick here in terms of seeing that these recommendations actually get implemented now? How does it work?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Charbonneau. We've been asked as a stakeholder to provide feedback to the Conservation Authority. So if council wishes, my report and any other, if there are any amendments to my report, will be forwarded on to Conservation Authority staff, and they will bring that to the authority. We are requesting, as one of the recommendations I've suggested, is that the report, my apologies, that the manual would be circulated again to stakeholders following any edits that are the outcome of the different stakeholder feedback forms and reports that are being submitted to the Conservation Authority.
I guess my question, Candace, is, is the report, when sent to staff, is it sent to the authority members as a whole, or is it watered down in terms they just pick and choose which recommendations they want to see the 13 members discuss and have implemented? I guess I'm just trying to understand the process.
I don't know if I have enough, my apologies through you, Mayor Charbonneau. I don't know if I have enough information on their internal process to know whether all comments will be submitted as a package to the authority for review with a recommendation from their staff, or if they would summarize the comments that they've received.
The CAO just popped on. She made
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think what we could do is potentially just add to the recommendation that level of clarity that I'm hearing council seek, that it be forwarded to the actual authority in addition to staff, perhaps, so that the comments are directly placed on the authority agenda.
And I think that's a great idea, Kara and the CAO, because you just such fine work you've done here, Candace. You summarize things so well, and the points are recommendations are to me are very solid. You just hate to see them get lost between going to staff and making it its way into the authority of the 13 members. So that was my question. Thanks.
Councilor Matt, do you have some insight as a member into, is that why you raised your hand? Into
Yeah,
that?
well, yes, I was going to suggest that either Councillor Halpin or myself, we could send those directly, send the link to this report directly to the authority members, and just to give them a heads up of this is what Candace has done on behalf of the town of Saugeen Shores, and whether or not their municipalities had as comprehensive a review done, and any of these might align with what they did. But it might be worthwhile for them to see this. We have a meeting on Thursday of this week, so it's only a couple of days, but I could do that tonight or tomorrow morning.
I would just say, I think I have confidence in our members, Councilors Halpin and Mayette will make sure that all of our comments are seen by the authority and that this council's opinions are represented there. I'm sure they'll do that for us. So I know in any way that you can as part of the discussion or before that, I think would be appreciated. The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. And you just stole a little bit of my thunder. I was going to just recognize that our two representatives who attend those meetings, I have confidence based on their contributions whenever an SVC thing comes up on our agenda. One or both of them always contribute something meaningful. So I have no doubt that their contributions and their participation is representing us well. I did want to, though, recognize that I appreciate your comments, Luke, Mr. Mayor, concerning various situations in the past that have happened and that sort of thing, and the potential for some concern to be valid going forward. Along with that, though, Councillor Halpin makes a good point. We delegate all the time here. And so your comments, Mr. Mayor, in particular, about how the authority should have the decision-making power and ultimately the decision-making power. We should remember that here too. And so just to make sure that, our own house is set up in a way that we're following through with that here. So I recognize both of the arguments and comments as having validity. But this question of delegation, we struggle with it too here. So certainly I did appreciate your comments about Gailey. I think almost all of us that are in attendance tonight, maybe there's one exception. I think we've all sat at one time or another on the SVCA governance body. I didn't want to call it get it wrong. So, we all have experience there, but certainly, Councillor Mayette and Councillor Halpin, I really appreciate that they bring us information and share insights every time there's an SVCA thing on our agenda. So that's just my comment.
Thank you. The CAO, you had a comment?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to respond to the two comments on the delegation piece. And I just wanted to highlight for council that when staff have brought forward the request to council to delegate, it's usually in the situation where there's an approval that we're looking to advance. What Candace has raised in tonight's comments is that the delegation request is for dispute resolution. And so there is a distinct difference in when we bring forward pieces to council. It is for approval that we're looking to delegate to staff. If there was ever a dispute situation, we would always bring those forward to council for dispute.
Thanks for that clarity. The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, don't want to prolong this too much longer, Mr. Mayor, but just quickly, again, the great work, and I have full confidence in Councilor Mayad and Councilor Halpin. Absolutely, they'll speak to these recommendations. Could we, though, as a follow-up, we hate to see this great work lost, and I know it won't, but that we do receive a follow-up report to see which recommendations, if any, how many, uh, were uh, were brought forth and approved and implemented, which ones weren't and why? Is that something that can happen, Dave and Bud, to you, Mr. Mayor? Is that something we can get a report back? I'm
Councillor
just
Halpin.
trying to understand the process.
Councillor Halpin.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. They sent this out to all the municipalities, and whether we're going to see the feedback from all the municipalities or not, I don't know. We can find out for you. The other thing that we can certainly do is when we receive the feedback, we can share it with the council. So that way you guys know exactly what we saw. And then that way you could determine if, well, you feel like some of our comments weren't taken seriously or weren't included, then, but let's give them a chance to act in good faith and everything. And then we'll kind of be the watchdog to make sure that our concerns are being heard there. Is that a good answer?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you, Councillor Halpin. We'll get Councillor Davinsky and then back to Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, I'm the one that hasn't served on the SVC ever.
Just not yet, John. Not yet.
Not yet. I would just like to say your comments I support wholeheartedly, because that's not the first time I've heard those types of comments, even not serving on the authority. And I have complete confidence in Councillors Mayette and Halpin and the work that they are doing and the message that they will send, not to the authority, but to management. Let's put it that way. And we'll keep an eye on our behalf. But let me rest assured, I have not served on this board. I don't know the inner workings, but I've certainly heard these things before from other people. And that was an excellent comment, Mr. Mayor. It's too bad it can't be included in the report. Thank you. And thanks to Candace Hand. This is an incredible report. And it's made easy. It's almost like Cole's notes. So thank you very much for that. And thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't sure where we left the distribution of Candace's report. I think it's a good idea for us to send it so it is included on the next, or on an agenda for the SVCA, for the public to be able to see that as well.
Councillor Grace, would you be prepared to, this has been moved and seconded, would you be prepared to move that the feedback, the stakeholder feedback that we're putting together here be forwarded to the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority and to all member municipalities of the authority?
Yes.
Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by the Vice Deputy Mayor. So that's an amendment. I'll ask all in favor of that amendment. That's carried. Okay, so now that's the motion is amended. Anything else, Councillor Grace? No. Councillor Matt?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Just reviewing now the agenda that we're looking at on this Thursday, and this item is not on the agenda for this week. So what's Candace's report is going to go back to staff, and then they're going to compile and revise their draft manual based on the feedback. So this could be a month or even 2 months before it comes around to being approved by the authority. But we will make sure that Candace's report gets at least an opportunity for the other authority members to see if any of these things resound with them as well.
Thank you. And yeah, I just a final comment from me. I apologize for being heated in my comments. I dedicated 11 years of my life to the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority. My picture hangs on the wall there, and I care an awful lot about that organization, and I want to see it run well. And I really don't believe it's running well today. And I do have a lot of experience there. And so, and that's said with a great deal of respect, a lot of respect for not only my friends here, but all of my friends on that board. I have many friends, board, I call it board again. I have many friends on the authority, many, and a lot of respect for all of them. It's really more of a plea to all of them to look carefully at how it's running and look at this manual as your opportunity to get control of it and to be aggressive and insert yourselves into the decision making because that's your right. You are the authority. And so that's what I ask of you. And I hope that you will do it. I have as everyone has said, I have great confidence in Councilors Mayette and Halpin. And it's going to be the authority's decision to take or leave any of these comments. So I have confidence that the authority will do the right things and and make the right decisions for us all. This is our last opportunity to have input, so we're having it tonight. But I look forward to your input as members of the authority and representing all these views. You've heard the recommendation, moved and seconded as amended, and I'll ask all in favor. That is carried. All right. And thank you, Candace, for that report. All right, so we have the consent agenda there. There's only one item there. Sorry. So I'll just ask mover and seconder that council receive the Communications Tower 171 Concession 14 report for information. Is there a mover and seconder for that? The Deputy Mayor and Councilor Davinsky. Any comments anyone wants to make on that? The Deputy Mayor? Oh, you're muted there, Diane.
Turned it off instead of left it on. It wouldn't appear as though in the end, we can say yay or nay because it's the county will ultimately have some authority with this because of the location of the lot.
The county.
There's a question mark after that. Sorry, it sounded like a statement.
Manager Development Services.
It's not the county, it's the federal government. I can't remember the agency. I should have been prepared for that, but they consider communications towers and the location of them and the process through which the app proponents must go, and the decisions are made by an agency of the federal government.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions or comments? Councilor Grace?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually asked Jay a question about our policy on this, and he reminded me that we do have a good policy on communication towers, which we didn't always have, but this is in the official plan, and it talks about appropriate location and what the municipality can do, what it values in terms of location and characteristics of these towers. So I know in the past there was one that was going to be located in a really prominent place, kind of close to the entrance, the north entrance to Southampton. And so I'm glad to see that we have that included in our official plan because, yes, the power does rest with the federal government, but the federal government also does take into account the fact that municipalities have given some thought to expressing what their values are with these communication towers. So thank you to staff for including that. And I'm, I don't think it affects this particular project. But in future, if something else comes up, then we do have those tools to be able to negotiate an appropriate location.
Yep, the manager.
I just want to say we haven't commented yet. I mean, the whole process is outlined in the report is they will seek comment and then it will come back and then there'll be a comment. So we haven't at this point said anything about the mitigation of it, just FYI, that's all.
Thank you, Councillor Halpin.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. But surely this is a pretty good spot for a tower like that. You know, that if I was to make any comment, I would say that we're increasingly reliant on cell communications and everything like that. You know, if you're going to have that, we need the towers. And certainly the location of this tower can't be an interference of anything, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? I guess my only comment would be this tower is intended to provide wireless broadband. That's what Explore is, right? And Explore has a contract through ASIP to provide broadband to well, much of southwestern Ontario, including Saugeen Shores. And my only comment, I guess, would be I wish they weren't building towers. I wish they were burying fiber. And that's certainly the position of this council that we've expressed. I don't know if that's a legitimate comment to submit or not to this, Jay, but to me, I worry about this wireless approach because I think it will mean that these folks out in this area don't have the level of broadband service that they deserve, frankly. So it's although good to see Explore advancing on this because it's important to try to get wireless or try to get broadband to everybody in Ontario by the end of this year. That's the goal the province has set for itself. But it would be nice if it was buried fiber. And I guess the only other comment, I guess two comments, because only other question I have is related to the helicopter pad, which is not all that far away from this location, which services the hospital on occasion. And I just wonder, is that, I assume that's something that will come into consideration as part of these discussions, maybe not from us, but from others, or will it?
Well, I mean, I don't know. It's federally regulated as well as a as landing facility, but I will also just make a note, that when I comment back to Explore, that'll be part of the discussion, I hope.
Yeah, but just worth flagging. I'm sure it's not a problem, but it'd be worth flagging because we don't want there to be any interference with those operations. Anyway, all right. So you've heard the resolution. It's been moved and seconded. I'll ask all in favor. That's carried. Okay, so now we're on to bylaws, and we have two bylaws there. Anybody wish to have either of those bylaws considered individually? Don't see any request for that. I don't. Morgan, can you just read the resolution for those bylaws for me because I don't have it here for some reason.
Yes, I have that bylaw 16/2025 and 17/2025 are hereby read, passed, and sealed this 18th day of February 2025.
Thank you. Is there a mover and seconder for that? Moved by the deputy mayor, seconded by the vice deputy mayor. Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. And then the confirmatory bylaw. Would you read that one for me too, Morgan?
Sure. I have that bylaw 18/2025 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council of the town of Saugeen Shores is hereby read, passed, and sealed this 18th day of February 2025.
Thank you, Morgan. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by this Councillor Gray, seconded by Councillor Mayette. All in favor? That's carried. And finally, I'll take a resolution that this council meeting adjourn at 9:07 p.m. Is there a mover and seconder? Councillor Davinsky, Councillor Halpin, all in favor? Council stands adjourned. Have a good evening, everybody.
Good night, everyone.